We always ask, what is your favorite type of story, fiction or nonfiction? But what about what would you want to write? Let's talk. Hello, everybody. My name is Rob. This is my mom, Caren. You're watching Books, Banter and Beyond, the show all about books and book-related things because we love
and
books
and bantering about it.
and bantering and going beyond, as they said in Toy Story, right?
Ba-dum-bum.
All right, so today we are going to ask a similar question to what we usually do. What is your favorite kind of book? But we're going to talk about what would you want to write as an author, or more so, why do authors pick and choose what they do? So obviously we have two general genres here, or styles, fiction and nonfiction. Fiction is usually always made up, sometimes might have basis in reality, whereas nonfiction is strictly historical, real experiences, real life, all of that good stuff. And I talk about this a lot when, I'll talk to people online or I'll have conversations here with you. And it always seems to be personal preference to everybody. Most people who like fiction seem to enjoy the fantasy of it, the fact that everything is made up, everything is so crazy out there. That's what draws them in. Those who like the nonfiction, like I know yourself, when it comes to self-help and stuff like that, tend to like more of the real world experiences. And that's why nonfiction suits those readers. But what would you think when it comes to the authors, right? Is it same or different? Really, to be honest, I think it has more to do with their personal upbringing and where they come from. I was having this conversation online the other day as to why authors write the way they do. And it seems to be many people agree that it's how they saw the world or what they were in. So, for instance, we've talked about Tolkien a bunch before,
Right.
and many people don't realize he was in the World War at the time. Hence the reason why he wrote his books how he did, because he was mimicking what war was in real life
Right.
using fantasy creatures, using fake, whatever.
So it was real fiction.
It was real fiction. Yeah, exactly. It was basically a made up story based on what he knew um, was going on in life. Some people, such as, Stephen King, for instance, same thing, things that he dealt with personally, personal traumas. He put that into his stories to extend the plot line, right? He used what he knew, even if it was, negative, he used what he knew to draw ideas from.
Well, but one might say that every writer pulls on what they know, regardless of whether, even when writing a nonfiction book.
That is true. And I think that brings up a good question as to what do you do with that then
Right.
after you pull from? And I think that's where the creativity comes into play.
Mm.
If you're really good at, dumbing it down, making things up, so to speak, then fiction is probably up your alley. If you can pop in, a dragon, magic, a this, a that, or whatever, you are probably more prone, let's say, to fictitious.
Right.
Um, if you are someone who is analytical, maybe you are a teacher by trade, maybe you are, a historian, whatever, you may be more prone to that. So you are correct. I think generally speaking, when you wake up in the morning, what you do is going to dictate what thoughts come in.
Right. I mean, I also think about like historical fiction, where it comes. I to take away from the fact that I do love nonfiction. That is really my where I
Right,
like to read.
right.
But I do like historical fiction because it is based in something that happened in history with a particular person, but they've embellished around it. But it's grounded in the actual event, I guess. And so in my mind, it actually becomes sort of like nonfiction because I know enough to know what's real and not real.
Right. So I guess in a way, because I know before we came on, we were talking about me writing short stories, you having little desire to. But with that in mind of what you just said, if you were to write a short story, would you go that pathway and write something about you or something in
Yes,
life?
absolutely. It would be something that I knew personally
Right.
that that made it not fiction, but that I could make a story around And in fact, as you know, Rob, when I was a cantor, I did a lot of funerals, and I did
Hmm.
a lot of services and a lot of, the actual comments about the people. And I wanted
Right.
to write a book at that point called You're Only as Good as Your Last Funeral. And so I actually thought about that. So what you're saying is absolutely true. It would be true, but some fiction around it.
And I think the last part I'll say for the general is I think it's what is the easiest thing to do as well, and I think that's kind of where my answer goes. Obviously, you have to be good at writing, you have to be good at forming, but I think generally speaking, and I could be wrong, but I feel like the writers who or the authors who are writing so many books, I think it somewhat comes easy as the time goes on, not necessarily the writing plot, but I
Right,
think generally they can sit down for a few hours a day and just take your pencil and go da da da, and you're done. So
right.
I think at some point you do have to admit to the fact that if it's easy to do, that's your niche, right? I mean, I,
Right.
I don't I don't want to
No,
sound like
it
people
actually
can't do their job. I just
makes
feel like
sense. Totally makes sense. If not even just if it's easy, but you really just you don't mind it, you want to do it, and you're going to sit down. Even if it's not easy, you want to do it. It's enjoyable. Maybe the word is enjoyable.
and it makes me think there was a video I watched where it was George R. R. Martin, the writer of Game of Thrones, and sat down with Stephen King a while back at one of these book conventions. And off the bat, George asked him, he goes, "How the F do you write so many books?" And everybody laughed, and Stephen did too. And it wasn't so much that he was writing so many books, it was just, you have an idea, you put it down, and then if it works, and then you flesh it out. So the question is funny, but it really isn't a how are you doing so much. It's really, how do you write? So
Right.
what is working in your brain?
So, Rob, you're the writer. I mean, you that's what you graduated in college from,
Hmm.
a degree in creative writing. That's who and what you were, maybe. And I kind of assume it still is who you are, whether you're using those talents. Um, what is easier for you to write? And I already know the answer because I know this kind of stories that you wrote. But
Right.
was the fiction or nonfiction or fantasy versus
So I
real
think
life?
because along with the creative writing, I also studied the degree with literature and all that stuff. Fiction kind of just became the thing because I studied more classes about Shakespeare and science fiction stuff like that. So for me, and I would caveat by saying short stories only. I can't imagine sitting down and writing like Stephen King's The Shining or whatever. That
Right.
was so many pages. But I think for me, and I think many people may agree, when you study the specific things, it's ingrained to do so. So even if you try to write something else, you end up back to what you know,
Right.
whatever it is. So I think the where do they decide to do it? I think it's probably what they're used to writing. And again, I don't know if other people who write fiction write nonfiction. I think they do, but I think more so the books that are published are the area of expertise. So I know, going back to King, he does have one called On Writing, and it's basically his book about how he grew up and became an author. So he's written a biography on himself.
Which is
But at the
nonfiction.
same time, even though it's such a popular book, if you say his name, that's probably not going to be the book that comes to mind
Right.
because it's not fiction. So I
Right.
think you have to open your mind to everything. But I think, for me, when you study something so much, that's where you go to, even if you don't want to, because you just it
Well,
just happens.
fiction in your case is what you like to write,
Right.
fantasy, supernatural kind of stuff, science fiction. I mean, you're in
Right.
that realm. So how did you come from me? I want to know.
How did I come? Things happen, it changes.
I
I don't know.
know. I know.
Aliens, maybe, I don't know.
So, okay. So, is there a unique advantage to writing fiction versus nonfiction? What's the
I
positives? What's
think
the
the person
negatives?
writing probably will say yes or no because that's what they like. For the reader, again, I think you have to enjoy it to have that advantage. I mean, there's also obviously cons to it all. If you write too fantastic, your book kind of ends up getting muddled and whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think the advantage to one or the other, comes down to, I think, your personal preference. I think usually because fiction can be made up, that does have a little bit higher of the advantage because you really can't be wrong when it's not real,
Right. Oh,
right?
that's an
With nonfiction, you kind of have to at least 98% go along with the story.
and even if it is called a story, nonfiction generally, I don't unless it's an autobiography or biography is not to me. It's not a story. Normally, nonfiction is not about the author. It's not a story per se. It's self help or
It's kind of a funny, yeah. I don't know what the right word
there's
would
no
be.
arc. I don't know what the arc would be like in a nonfiction book when you talk about writing arcs.
I mean, I'm trying because I know a few episodes ago we talked about the survival stories, and I'm trying to think of how those books went. It was still written as if you were watching a show, and it still
Right.
felt like it was made up. But then you come back and you realize that group of people did that,
Right.
and then
And
you have to
therefore,
think, what did I just read?
I guess only
You know
Rob.
what I mean?
Right.
Like,
If it's a person who experienced it that wrote it, rather than somebody who heard about it, did research about it,
right.
and wrote it, and then told the story, now you're right. That this is what makes I think literature so exciting. That's why this is why we do.
Yeah. I think, it makes you it makes you discuss, it makes you debate, and it makes you
Right.
have to read more because you have more questions than answers after the initial
Right.
question.
Right. Well, we've hit that point in the show where we want to remind people that Books, Banter, and Beyond is brought to you by the Next Chapter Bookstore.shop, where it is a gently used bookstore online. It's very cool. If you're into paperbacks or hardbound, go check it out. Go scan the QR code. There are books in there that you didn't know you wanted to read. And the prices are really, really good because, again, it's a used bookstore. Comic books. If you like comic books, go and scan that QR code as well. And of course, merchandise. If you just have to have your Books, Banter, and Beyond mug or t shirt or something kind of fun like that, then go ahead and scan that QR code. Right?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me too. Always fun, Rob. Go out and give somebody an awesome day. We're going to see everyone on the next Books, Banter, and Beyond. Goodbye.